and you know, she wants you to participate. I know that she is getting you guys to participate a bit because I sent you all that sheet that we're going to use today. But if not, please just we'll wait for the questions till the end. If you have your questions, you don't want to forget them, just type them on the chat, and I will look at them and we'll ask the questions for Laura. Okay, but until then, I will let Laura, you take over. Okay.
Okay, awesome. All right, I'll just share my screen here. Okay, how's that? Good?
That's perfect. We can see it.
Working? Okay, awesome. Okay, so I will jump right in. So thank you guys so much for having me. I know you've had a few speakers and I'm sort of the last of a series of really awesome talks. So hopefully you guys are really enjoying them and learning a lot. I will introduce myself in a second. I have a slide with some info on there, but I'm also going to just say that with the worksheets, you guys all got one of these. They've sent out in advance. Those are actually just to be completed like later on. I'm sorry, it's very long, but I just found all of it was kind of important and I wanted to leave space on there for you guys to write things down and take a few notes. But a lot of it is kind of self-reflective, so it's kind of hard to do with such a large number of people, and doing it virtually is a little bit harder. So feel free to take that on later on, or maybe with your coaches during one of your virtual sessions. And I have my email up on my slide, and I'll have it up at the end as well. So you guys can always email me if you have follow-up questions, either about the presentation or about the slides as well. Or sorry, excuse me, about the worksheet. Okay, so have it nearby because we will do one or two of those together, sort of individual work there, but most of it will be done on your own after the fact. So if you don't have it, or you forgot to print it, or you ran out of ink or whatever it is that happens, feel free to just have pen and paper. That's just fine as well. Okay, so I will jump in. I'm going to be speaking about sort of the mental performance side today, and I'm going to speak about some of the major concerns that we've seen, I think, as mental performance consultants, also sort of in the media and things like that, and how to sort of combat those or navigate your way through those. Okay. Whoops. Slides work. There we go. All right. So my name is Laura. I'm a mental performance consultant. This is, I always say, a much blonder, younger version of me, but I used to be I was actually a swimmer, believe it or not, until I was about 13. And then I switched over to water polo, which I know was Adam's background too, which was really funny because, well, you know, there's not that many water polo people out there, but that was a much better fit for me. And I swam and competed as a water polo player at the club level, provincial level, and as well with the junior national team. And then when I was kind of ready to retire and move on from being an athlete, I started coaching. So I coached at the club level, the same club that I grew up playing at. And I coached with the Quebec team. I'm originally from Montreal. And I coached with the junior national team as well, and got to go to a Pan Am. And that was really cool. I got to see sport from a lot of different angles and different experiences, different athletes. And that was sort of where my love of the sports psychology side of things really grew from. So while I was doing that, I was doing my undergrad degree in psychology, and then eventually went on to do my master's in sports psych. So I am now a professional member of the Canadian Sports Psychology Association. For the last, I guess, seven years now, I was out in Victoria, BC. I was working as a mental performance consultant there, working at an integrated health clinic. So working with the different professionals, so physios, chiros, acupuncturists, naturopathic doctors, kinesiologists, counselors, and I'm actually a registered counselor out there as well. So kind of had my share of different views again on sport and working with athletes and working with people rehabbing injuries and all kinds of different stuff. So that was a really cool experience. But we recently moved back to Toronto, which is great because I have a 3-year-old daughter, and my family's out here, and my husband's family's out here. So it's been nice to be closer to family, even though we really can't see anybody these days. But that's just sort of the way it is right now. Okay, so I'll jump right into my presentation. Okay, so I wanted to start with just a brief story. I was, and then when I was thinking about this presentation, it brought me back to this sort of example. So it would be over a year ago now. I was playing a game with my nephew. So he was 5 at the time. We were playing Snakes and Ladders, a game you guys have probably all heard of or played yourselves. And he's a funny little guy, and we were playing, and he's kind of like making up rules and like skipping squares, and he'd like roll the dice and roll them like too far where I couldn't see what number it landed on, and he'd tell me what number it landed on, and he's like, Auntie Laura, it's a 6, it's a 6. And obviously just was blowing past me on the board. And wouldn't you know it, I guess luck was on my side, and I rolled and I landed on the ladder that brings you like straight up near the top. And this little guy, he's only 5. What does he do? He flips the whole board, like pieces everywhere, the dice go flying, and storms off in a fit. And I am sitting there kind of feeling horrible because this poor little guy is only 5. And I didn't think he'd have that strong of a reaction. But it just made me think, you know, this is kind of the point that we're all at right now in this sort of game of life, so to speak, where we're kind of like ready to flip the board. Like it kind of sucks sometimes these days. And some of that is due to chance, right? Like how the die rolls. But some of it has to do with us as people as well, what type of players we are in that game of life. So I'll come back to this in a little bit. Okay, so as I said at the beginning, anyone who might have come in a little bit after that, today I'm going to speak a little bit about, I guess, the 3 most common concerns that we've been seeing. So the last year has been crazy and, you know, unprecedented is the word that everybody's throwing around. We have never seen anything like this before, and truthfully, it's been pretty scary at points, right? For a lot of different reasons for different people, and we're all feeling a little bit like a fish out of water. Forgive me, I couldn't help myself. I know you guys are swimmers. A fish out of water, right? What a better example. So in my work with athletes and coaches and my colleagues, you know, having discussions with other people who do what I do, and even seeing it in the media, there seems to be a lot of very common themes or very common, you know, concerns that come up. So, and they're all very valid as well. So I'm going to get into those a little bit today, and then I'm going to speak to how to navigate them a little bit. Okay, so the first big one is a loss of identity or a loss of purpose, right? You guys are swimmers who can't swim. So who are you and what's the point? What's going on? Well, here's what we know about athletic identity. So, and that's sort of how much you might identify as an athlete. It's that the higher level you compete at, okay, the more you compete at a high level, the more likely you are to strongly relate to the athlete role, right? So identify as an athlete. And the more you relate to that role, the more you identify as an athlete, the more likely you are to experience that sort of identity crisis when something disrupts it, okay? So based on what I know about you guys and the schedule of an elite athlete, an elite swimmer, I think it's safe to say that a lot of you probably fall into this category, right? You wake up, you swim, you eat, you go to school, you swim, you eat, you go to sleep, you repeat, right? It's your routine, it's your day in and day out. It's hard for swimming not to be a large part of your identity. And we see this sort of identity crisis a lot in when athletes get injured, right? That's a very common one, or sometimes when they retire, right? You let's say you experience an injury and you can't perform, or you're very limited in what you can do. You don't know when you might get back in the water. Some of you may have been through this before. Obviously, there's some parallels here, right? You don't know when you're going to get back in the water, and you can't train and you can't perform. So it actually makes a lot of sense that you would be feeling this way. Okay, you're a swimmer, you can't swim anymore. Who are you, and what are you doing with your life, right? Your goals are now out the window. So what do I do? Sorry. Oops, not jumped in here. There we go. Okay, the second one that we see a lot or hear a lot of complaints about or people get upset about is the lack of control over what's happening, right? There is a lot going on right now that falls outside of our control. You think something's going to happen and then something else happens. right? The restrictions change or the vaccination schedule changes. There's a lot going on. It is only natural for us to prefer to have control to what's going on to and around you, right? A lack of control can create a lot of anxiety for most people, especially if there are any of you out there who are type A's. I'm with you. Okay, you're my people. the list makers, the planners, the color coordinators, you know, those people, I'm with you. It is really hard, okay, to not know what's going on or to not have control over those bits and pieces of your life. And the third one is a fear of the unknown. We don't know a lot about the future, right? We don't know when we're going to get back in the water exactly. We don't know when we're going to be able to compete again. We don't know when we're going to see family and friends again. When will we go back to school and normal classes? There are so many unknowns. And as high-level athletes, you guys are used to having a lot of structure in your day, right? A lot of structure in your life. Your training is pretty regular. Competition schedules even are fairly regular, right? You have a lot of the same sort of invitational meets or big meets that happen at the same time every year. Nationals, trials, you know, they all happen like spring, summer. You sort of know how to pace your training and pace your year. You guys are used to pacing a race, right? You pace a 50, well, it's not a 50, you pace a 200 or an 800, and you know how to do that because you know when it ends. But if you don't know when something ends, you have that unknown, then it makes it very difficult to pace your year, to pace your training when you don't know what's at the end, right? Imagine trying to pace a race where you don't know how long it is. So how do we navigate this? How do we find or maintain our identity as an athlete or a swimmer? How do we maintain our purpose? How do we deal with the uncontrollables? How do we forge ahead into the unknown? Okay, so let's go through this a little bit. Okay, acceptance. So this is a big one. I can't stress this enough. This is like the most important first step, is to accept where we're at and what's going on. So what is acceptance? Well, over here on my left-hand side, it says it's raining. I don't like rain. I wish it wasn't raining. My day would be better if it wasn't raining. My day is ruined. Every day is like this. It's always like this. Why is it always rain when all I want is for it to be sunny? And then the other side is sort of like, it's raining. Yeah, it is. And that's sort of a very simplified version. You know, you don't necessarily have to ignore that it's raining, but you don't have to dwell on it either. And the idea here being that we didn't choose this, but it's happening, right? And the harder we fight against it mentally, the harder it is to accept it. It's okay to grieve what you had. It's okay to miss the sun. It's okay to miss regular training and competition and seeing your friends and family. That is so normal, right? That makes perfect sense. But we can't stay there. We can't dwell on that. We have to be able to move forward. I think with the people coming in, there we go. Okay. So the sooner we accept our circumstances, the sooner we can move forward. And that's not just circumstances like the environment and things that are happening in our world. It also means accepting the emotions and the struggles that come along with it, right? We are all so uncomfortable and we are so frustrated, and maybe you're not that motivated, and maybe you're actually even really angry that all this is going on. And those are all totally normal responses to this situation. And we need to sort of feel those feelings and acknowledge them in order to process them a little bit, rather than kind of like shoving them all down and just telling ourselves to be positive and stay tough. Okay, those are not necessarily the most helpful coping strategies, because they ignore the problem rather than facing it and just kind of accepting it for what it is. So the next piece, when we come down to that identity, that identity concern. So this is something that, well, I'm going to read this quote first. So there's a quote there at the bottom that says, "I really struggled with finding my identity without sport every day. I had to find value in myself that wasn't defined by diving, and realize that I am not just a diver." And I found that quote and I thought it was so relevant. It was so perfect for summarizing what's going on right now. So when it comes to identity, for me, there are sort of two ways to approach this. The first is to try to maintain our identity as a swimmer, right? To to hold on to whatever we have left, given that we've been out of the water for so long. The second piece is sort of what Kaylee identified here, is to focus on the other facets of ourselves, the pieces of ourselves that aren't necessarily swimming related, that are just us as a person, right? To remind us that we are more than just swimmers, so that we don't have that full identity crisis when something comes in and disrupts it. So the first piece is something that I asked you guys to discuss with your coach this past week or so, is that idea of what does being a swimmer mean to you? So Eddie, I'm not sure if you guys had a chance to chat about that, but I asked Eddie to give me like a few bullet points when he posed that question to you guys, what your responses were.
So things like very common things that comes with I am a swimmer is I think relationship to being an athlete. So, you know, a commitment to a sport. It also some things I came up with where obviously I belong in the pool,
Yeah.
which is a big one, right?
Yeah.
And but I think that most things that athletes usually or that tell me is they belong to commitment. You know, they have a commitment. They have a something that is outside of school or kind of norm that they belong to, right? Does that make sense to you?
Totally. Like it's like an exclusive club, because you kind
That's
of
right. Exactly. An exclusive club. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Okay. Yeah, I think it was maybe Adam who spoke a little bit to that, saying that how hard it is to have a schedule like what you guys have, and being in high school, let's say, and nobody works as hard as you guys do, and it's true. The schedule of an elite athlete is no joke. So that's great. Those are awesome things. Those make perfect sense. So I sort of sat down and thought about some of these as well, and here are some of the ones that I came up with. Okay, and these are all kind of different pieces of what I thought it meant to be a swimmer. And if you really kind of look at them, you'll probably notice, I mean, I did sort of cherry pick. I excluded things like smelling like chlorine all the time, no matter how many times you shower, having wet hair and goggle marks and, swimsuit rubbies and, all of those wonderful things that are very specific to being a swimmer. But if you kind of pick those out, you've got all these other ones that if you look really closely, they can all actually be accomplished without actually physically swimming, right? They are qualities of elite athletes and elite people, not just specific to swimmers. And if you really think about it, you sort of break down the hours in your week, there actually aren't there. It's only actually a small portion of your time that is spent in the pool. It seems like a lot more, but you're also doing dry land. You're also balancing your priorities with school. You have early mornings and you're lifting weights and you're doing, maybe you're reviewing video and you're working on race strategies or, strength, things like that. You have meetings with your coaches. These are all things that are part of what I would call your high performance lifestyle or your elite level lifestyle. Okay, and these things can all still be going on. It is unfortunate that we can't be in the pool, but this is a big chunk of your time. And I thought of this today. I saw on your social media you had a few athletes doing some examples of some of the training they've been doing at home, working on their strokes and stuff like that. And I loved there was a guy with his cap and his goggles on, and I thought that was so awesome.
Zach, because, I think he's here.
Yeah, Zach, I loved it. Yeah. And I thought it was so great to just really, you just miss that feeling, throw on your cap and goggles once in a while. What's the harm? Give yourself that feeling, that muscle memory. I thought it was really, really awesome. So the second piece of that, so we talked about sort of holding on to what you have and what's still there. And the second piece is sort of the idea that, sorry, my transitions aren't working here. There we go. That idea that you're not just a swimmer, right? The other half of that coin, sort of focusing on the other pieces of the other facets of yourself, knowing that deep down, you are more than just a swimmer. So swimming is just something that we do. It's not who we are, right? So if you look on the first page of your worksheet, there's a lot of questions that have to do with this sort of like, who are you? How would you describe yourself? What are your strengths? What other identities do you have? How do you normally cope with adversity? What are your values, right? Our values are so important. Those are the things that guide our decision making. They point us in the right direction. They inspire and motivate us to keep going. What qualities are important to you? What do you look for in other people? Because those are often things that you actually aspire to yourself. And these may seem like these sort of like deep, soul-searching kind of questions, because they kind of are. I can't answer these for you. These are the kind of questions that take time to answer. They take time to sit down. You might do it over a span of a few days or weeks even. You might add to your list as you go. But the point is that we need to know ourselves. We need to have that self-awareness. And that is something that I value. So anyone who's seen any of my talks that I've given, I know some of Eddie swimmers have seen some of the videos I did for CSCA, but I speak to self-awareness at least once in every presentation, because it's something that I value. So I try to include that, because we need to have that strong sense of self-awareness of what's important to us. And otherwise it makes it very difficult to be resilient when times are tough. If we don't know who we are, that slightest bit of adversity can really throw us off, right? Let alone a global pandemic that disrupts our whole lives and our whole schedule. So it's important to have that, to work on that, okay? And it's constant. It's not just a one-shot deal. Okay, there. The other half of this, so the what's my purpose? Well, I can say this. So your why hasn't changed, right? Why you do what you do has not changed, okay? But your how absolutely has. So how you're going about accomplishing your why, accomplishing your goals has changed. Absolutely. It doesn't mean that we can't set goals. Okay? Some tweaks are definitely going to need to be made, right? To now have your new goals line up with your actions, or your actions line up with your new goals. You had a goal for the season, and now that season isn't happening. Those performances aren't happening. Those competitions aren't happening. But it doesn't mean that they're never going to happen. And it doesn't mean that you can throw those goals in the garbage. They might still be relevant. You just might have to adjust them a little bit. When things like this happen, we have a tendency to take a step back and zoom out from the situation. We look at the big picture and we panic. We go, oh my gosh, well, what about trials? Well, I wanted to get that best time this year, and I was supposed to do this, and now I can't do it. And we get really worked up, and we get ahead of ourselves. And what we actually need to be doing is zooming in, right? Zooming in on the steps we are taking in this moment, in this day. Can you break down your goals even more? Can you find value in what you're doing today, right now? How is it getting you closer to where you want to be? Even if it's changed, even if it's not necessarily what you wanted to be doing, is it still helping you? And can you focus on that? So for example, if one of your goals was to qualify for trials this year, well, now trials has been pushed back. It's now being done, my understanding is invitation only. These things come up. So what can you do about that? How can you adjust that goal? Can you push it to next year? Can you accept that? Okay. And these are things we need to be thinking about. If you wanted to go a best time in an event this year, okay, well, that might be a little bit harder now since we're not in the water. But if you're doing the training on land that you can be doing as much as you can, then focus on that. And then when you get it back in the water, that's when you can start working on that side of it. Okay, but now more than ever before, we need to lock in on the process. Okay, we can't focus on the outcome. We have almost no control over the outcome, especially right now. We can only control the steps in front of us, right? What we're doing today, or maybe even tomorrow or this week. But we can't get too far ahead. We need to zoom in. Okay, so what can I control? This is my attempt at being current. I was going to use a TV remote and figured this was a much more relevant example. But so I wanted you guys to think about this a little bit. So as a general rule, like I said, we don't like to feel like we don't have control over things in our lives. It is normal. And we actually spend a surprising amount of time worrying and poring over things that we actually have very little control over. Something like getting back in the water or getting back to competing. And we don't even realize we're doing it. The first step in fixing that is catching yourself having that thought or that worry, okay, and asking yourself, is this something I can control? And if it's not, let it go, because there's nothing you can do about it, and worrying is not going to help. Okay? If it is something you can control, great. What can you do to fix it, or what can you do to take action? Okay? So, and then refocus, right? Refocus our energy and our thoughts towards the things that we can control rather than what we can't. So you guys have your worksheet there on the second page, I believe it is, yeah. Okay, so you have some space there. I wanted you guys to just take a minute and try and fill in as many, where you have the numbers, the 1, 2, 3, up to 10. Try and write down as many things as you can think of in the next, let's say, 30 seconds that you currently have control over. Okay, so take a second, 30, all time, and I want you to think about, what can you control? Things in your life that you can control. Okay, I'll give you a few more seconds. Okay, so hopefully you were able to come up with a few there. Here's what I have. Okay, and I limited myself to the number of buttons that there were there, but for the most part, these are some of the bigger ones, I would say. So things like energy gains and energy drains. I like to talk about these a lot. Is what I'm doing, or the person I'm talking to, or the conversation I'm having, or what I'm looking at on social media, whatever it may be, is it making me feel better, or is it making me feel worse? Thinking about those kinds of things. Is this a good use of my energy and my time and my thoughts, or not? Your focus, sleep, right? Adam spoke quite a bit about that. That was an awesome talk about sleep. Super important. Are you getting enough? Are you getting good quality sleep? Your breath. Are you able to take that good cleansing deep breath and relax yourself as you need it? The process, I just spoke to that a little bit in the last slide. What I consume. And I don't just mean nutrition and hydration. I mean your mind as well. What are you looking at on social media? What are you reading in the news media, right? Sometimes that doesn't always make us feel better, right? There's all kinds of different news coming out all the time, and it doesn't always make us feel better to read and listen to that. Your work ethic. What kind of work ethic are you bringing to your workout? Again, maybe you're not in the water, but you're still training. So you may as well bring 100% to that. The other pieces, so the things that we can't control, or I like to think of as sort of, they are part of the game. They are built into the structure of the game. Things like whether or not people follow the rules, other people's actions, opinions, decisions, timeline. Okay, again, that idea of, when will we be back in the water? When are we going to compete again? Will I be able to do this? Will I be able to do that? When can I see friends and family? Social media, what other people are posting online, right? We don't need to hear about that. I'm sure you guys have friends and who are other swimmers who are in different provinces, and maybe they're already back in the water. And that is super frustrating. That is super frustrating, but we can't control that, right? That is part and parcel. That's part of the game, and it doesn't matter. Okay, you matter. What you control, what you can. Okay, and the last one there, past and the future, which we spoke to a little bit, right? Missing what we used to have and wanting, things that are coming to come faster and get back in the water and compete. And then the idea of some of your thoughts and feelings. Sometimes we have these automatic thoughts that pop into our head that we can't necessarily control, but you can control your response. You can have that thought, acknowledge it, and let it go, right? It's a passing thought. Or you can dwell on it, or you can take action on it, but you choose your response, even though you may not have chosen that exact thought, right? But we need to take back control. We need to put the controller back in our hands and take over the game again, okay? Okay, so the unknown, we spoke about this a little bit, right? this fear of the unknown. At the risk of getting very existential on you, do we ever really know what's coming? Right? We think we're so prepared, and then something happens, and it's just sort of the way life goes, right? It's the way the dice roll. But I like this picture. It always, it always rings true for me. Is this idea that we think the path to success or the path to our goal or that our life is just going to go in a straight line, and it doesn't, right? It's all over the place. Things happen, right? A pandemic happens. Like, who could have predicted that? Nobody, right? But we go through all of these twists and turns all the time, right? There's tons of other things, and they're just part of the journey. They're part of the way to the end goal, right? We can't think too hard about that outcome, again, because there are too many twists and turns along the way. But the neat thing is that it's that agitation, it's that experiencing of something and coping as we go and as we find our way that actually make us stronger and better and grittier and more resilient athletes. And that's really what we want, right? I was listening to an interview with Michael Phelps. It was an old one. I think it was on 2020 or one of those old people shows. But the interviewer asked Michael, it was before he went to the Olympics and won his 8 medals. And they said, if you get to that 8th race and the medal's on the line and the record is on the line and you don't get it, are you going to be upset? And he kind of was like, no. He's like, well, yes, maybe initially I'll be a little upset, but ultimately no, because when I look back, I know that I did everything in my power. I took every step I needed to take. I stuck to the plan. My coach and I did everything we could in our journey to get there, that I can accept any outcome. And that's kind of where we need to be too, right? Is the idea that we can accept any outcome because we're taking as many steps as we can, given our situation, given our circumstances. What is more helpful? So people fear the unknown because they can't prepare, right? We can't prepare if we don't know what's coming. But what we can do is focus on what we can control, like we spoke about before, what we can do rather than what we can't, right? That idea of zooming in. We can develop a new routine, right? And stick to it. Give yourself some flexibility. If you like the routine of getting up early and doing a workout, whether it's swimming or dry land, right? And going to school and kind of keeping that routine, then great. If you're really tired one morning, sleep in, give yourself the break. You have that little bit of flexibility, and you need to sort of take that right now. Okay, take advantage of those scenarios right now. Ask for help. Okay, emotional, physical. If you need resources, you need something, ask for help. Okay, the best athletes know when to ask for help, and they actually do it. This sounds like a funny one, but try to have some gratitude, some appreciation for the journey, for what you're going through, and some things in your life that you might really appreciate that maybe have come up in the last year that you didn't even know that you were missing out on. Maybe gratitude has this amazing ability to energize our coping and our positivity. When we think of things that we are grateful for, we feel better and we are generally more optimistic. Right? That is what the research tells us. So it can't hurt to sit down and write down 2 or 3 things that you're grateful for, right? It just puts us in a more positive focus. And the last one is to stay present. You guys probably hear a lot of that, and I've spoken a lot of that just now, but that idea of sort of staying in the moment and being mindful. So I'm going to do a short exercise with you guys just along the theme of mindfulness. So on I think it's your 3rd page there, you guys have a similar kind of layout where you have past, present, and future written on the top. So I want you guys to draw 3 circles, so one under each word there. Okay, about the size of a toonie, let's say. Okay, so these are gonna, you can draw a little 2 eyes and a mouth there if you want. These are gonna represent your mind, okay, or your head. So let me ask you this: when your mind is in the past, when you are thinking about things, whether it's old performances or you miss being with your friends, you miss how things used to be, where is your body? It's in the present, right? When you're thinking about things in the future, right? When are we going to get back in the water? When can I get back to competing? When can I see family again? You know, even if it's, what am I going to eat for dinner tonight, right? Your mind's on the future. Where's your body? It's in the present, right? So I want you to draw a little, can be a little stick figure body there on the one in the middle. And this is really just meant to be a visual representation for you guys. You can stick it up on the wall, draw it on a post-it, put it on the mirror, whatever it is. It's just a reminder that although your mind may drift to the past and to the future, and that's okay, right? That's totally normal, like we've been saying, but there is a time and a place for it. Because if you're working on something, you're working toward a goal, well, your body is in the present, right? And it stays there. It doesn't matter where your mind goes. So your mind may as well join your body in the present, okay, and put in the work. Okay, be mindful, be present in what you're doing. When you show up to a workout, virtual, whatever it is, you give 100% mind and body. Okay, you have to be asking yourself, what is important now? Okay, so again, just like a visual reminder for you guys to tack up somewhere and have you thinking about that piece of it. Okay, so I think the common theme after everything I've said today is this idea of resilience, right? This idea of adapting despite the risk of adversity. And what we know about resilient athletes. So they possess high levels of resilient qualities. Makes sense, right? They are high in self-confidence and self-esteem, and they know who they are. They have high self-awareness. They are high in mental toughness. How can you build those qualities? Or how can you maintain those qualities in this time? You have extra time on your hands. How can you work on those? They use effective coping strategies. So things like facing their problem rather than avoiding it and focusing on the solution, right? It's important to know, for example, how you have successfully overcome adversity in the past, because that is information that might be valuable to you now in this moment when you're facing adversity again. How can you use that information? They're mentally tough, right? Makes sense. They are focused. They are process goal oriented. They respond appropriately to both success and failure. They focus on what they can control, right? All things we've been talking about. They have social support and they use it. Okay, that is a really big one. They know who to go for, who to go to for what. So if you are you want some emotional support, maybe you go to your parents or your siblings or a good friend. But if you need informational support, you might go to your coach or your physiotherapist or somebody else that you trust. There are different types of support. So know who to go to for what in order to get the best sort of bang for your buck. They acquire protective factors in the process. So that idea of that agitation and that experiencing and coping as you go, and they are better equipped to face adversity again in the future. In Adam's presentation, he threw up a graph of the stress and adaptation response that kind of went like stress and you adapt, and then stress and you adapt. Okay, same idea mentally, right? You experience stress, you cope with it, you deal with it, and you are tougher for it. So now you have a new threshold for stress. Okay? And the most resilient athletes are those people. They're not people who have never experienced adversity before. They've experienced probably more than most people, and they've worked their way through it. And the last one, they look for opportunities. Okay, they find ways to learn from their experience. They focus on the resources that they may have gained in these experiences. So things like, you know, yes, you've been quarantined or you know, in a shutdown for over a year now, but maybe you've become a better problem solver. Maybe you are better at making decisions. Maybe you're more independent, right? There's always good in these scenarios that we can pick out a little bit. So if I jump back to my little nephew, my 5-year-old nephew that I spoke about at the beginning of the presentation, he made me laugh. I was sort of taken aback. I didn't know what to do. So I kind of went around and picked up the pieces of the game and put it all away and put it back up on the shelf. And sure enough, within about 10 minutes, he came back downstairs and without saying a single word, climbed up and got the game, threw it down on the floor in front of me and said, "Let's go again." He was 5 years old, and I couldn't believe it, but I just was like, okay, let's do it. And it's like he had gone away. He needed a moment to sort of process it, accept it, think about what he could do, sort of gather himself and set the scene and come back and go again for another round. And my point here is that resilience is learned, right? Resilience is a learned skill. All of those things I just spoke about, those are things you can learn. It's not something that we have or we don't have, right? This idea of a growth mindset, that failure is an opportunity to grow, and you can learn anything you want, and challenges will actually make you better rather than being afraid or getting frustrated and giving up when things don't go your way, or that you're either good at something or you're not, that your abilities are limited. They are not. Okay, everything is learnable. Resilience is learned. And apparently it's learned from a very young age. Okay, even a board game designed for, a 5-year-old has some tough pills to swallow, right? we start training this skill from the time we're very young, that life is going to throw you these curveballs and these twists and turns and place obstacles in your path. And you're going to have to find your way over, around, through them in order to win the game. And yes, some of it is left to chance, right? Where you live, what zone you're in, what is the vaccine availability or the vaccination schedule. But there's also a strategic component, and that is your response. That is your strategic component. How are you going to play the game? Are you going to play worried about how the die rolls, or are you just going to roll and adapt as you go? Are you going to lose it and flip the whole board? Or are you going to go another round and hope that maybe you have better luck this time, or you make better choices this time, right? You get to choose. That's my point, is that you get to choose. Make the choice for growth, okay? And the last piece I wanted to speak to is this idea of self-compassion. I wanted to remind you to do all of this with, while also showing yourself some self-compassion, some kindness along the way. I think to a lot of people, this kind of sounds like a soft skill. I don't need to be kind to myself. I just need to power through, right? We're athletes, we're tough. Like, we can take on anything. And that's a great mindset to have, don't get me wrong. But we need to give ourselves a little bit of slack, a little bit of grace, right? Self-compassion is, it's not just about being kind. It's about understanding that all people struggle sometimes. Everybody makes mistakes and faces adversity and feels inadequate at points, right? We are not alone or special in that way, unfortunately. It's all just part of being human. So this idea of accepting your humanness. Everyone struggles sometimes. You're not alone. That idea of, you probably read some of the quotes that I'd thrown up on the slides, or listened to me read them, but those were from Olympic and national level athletes, right? The best of the best at the top of their game. And I'm willing to bet that you were able to relate to at least one, if not all of those quotes that were up there. And self-compassion is a major component of mental toughness and performance excellence, right? We are often so busy judging ourselves and focusing on the problem that we don't take a minute and pause to recognize how we're being affected by it, right? But the best athletes are the ones who are able to show themselves some grace in the time of struggle, right? To know that it's just temporary, it's not permanent. They don't waste time beating themselves up, right? It is too exhausting to be hard on yourself all the time. It is a waste of much needed time and energy that we could use these days, right? Everyone's going through a really hard time, and it's very unique. So we need to remember to give ourselves a bit of grace, to be kind to ourselves, especially when times are tough. Okay, I'll open it up to you guys if anyone has any questions that I can answer. Or
wow, guys, that I have to say, Laura, that was the most clear presentation of a very difficult topic I've ever heard. And I have heard, and I'm a fan of psychology. I read a lot and I watch a lot, and that was great. Thank you so much for that. So guys, it really doesn't get much better than that. In terms of just like, a good clear presentation of these ideas, of these principles. And so that was great, really. If you guys have any questions, I have a couple. I always kind of start them up a little bit.
Yeah.
And there are not so much questions, but just some thoughts that I like to throw in there.
Yeah.
I want to, I think in about middle in the presentation there, just gratitude. I
Mhm.
can't remember how you put it, but just give yourself gratitude. I think that's something that sometimes athletes, or I observe that athletes don't give themselves enough credit for what they're doing, right, especially right now.
Yeah.
I try to tell my group this all the time. um you know Zoom is like, this is hard, like it's a really cool feat, it's a cool um tool to have, but we, like you said, right, we're humans, we want that social, that connection, and especially in sports with our teammates and coaching, and going through this is and it's admirable to see the swimmers still connecting with us, and I think you guys really need to give yourself credit for that. um
Yeah, definitely.
so
It's not easy, and that's that
mhm.
self-compassion piece as well, I think is so relevant, because it's easy to give yourself a hard time if you don't feel like you're doing enough, or
Right.
some days are harder than others, and you kind of have to just give yourself some grace, and tomorrow's a new day, or whatever, whatever you need to tell yourself. But that the idea of gratitude, it can be very energizing and very can put us in a more optimistic place, right? We don't hear a lot of positive news,
Yeah.
unfortunately, these days.
No, I know. Yeah, seriously. The other one is just ask for help, right? It's
Mhm.
um you don't always have to go to like to coaches or parents, but your teammates, right? I think
Yeah.
that sometimes you think of help from people in positions of authority, like, we're
Mhm.
the only ones who can help you with your swimming career. And I have to say, some of the best thing I've learned in my swimming career were from other teammates. And
Totally.
so don't forget that, guys, right? Don't forget that. So I said this to my group, and I want to say to everyone who's here, right, is, even if you have a hard time having those workouts at Zoom, just show up and connect with the group once in a while. It really, really helps, right? Like, even if you're having a hard time with Zoom, with my group, I even say, like, if you want to just show up and watch, right? Like, just
Yeah.
be there and connect with the group. It helps a lot.
Yeah.
um
I've been saying a lot that just because you're isolated physically doesn't mean you're isolated emotionally or socially. There are
Absolutely.
still ways to, now more than ever, there are ways to get out there and still talk to people. And when I say ask for help, it doesn't even necessarily mean, directly asking for help. It might just be, confiding in someone or venting to someone. You're having a
Venting,
hard
yeah.
time with something. And that's what teammates are great for, because, again, that idea of like, nobody understands an athlete's schedule like another athlete, right?
Yeah,
Those are going to be your closest friends, probably for the
correct.
next few years. And those are the best people to vent to, because they get it.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that my observation is just, kids don't ask enough for help. I think they don't. It's hard.
Yeah,
It's really hard. You put yourself in a vulnerable position in front of somebody
yeah,
else, right? So it's
totally.
difficult. I get it, but I think, from what I hear here, right, like from what we heard here today, guys, is it's normal, right? It's We're all in this
Yeah,
position, and just feel free, right? We're here for that, coaches and
yeah.
teammates. So,
And I think we
um,
get locked on this idea of like having to be tough and not,
mhm.
show that emotion. And it's actually kind of the opposite. Like, it takes a lot more strength and security to show that vulnerability, to talk about how you're feeling, and to somebody else, and get their opinion. And the people who are on the receiving end of that, it doesn't mean that you have to fix the problem, right? We get a
Mhm.
lot of that too, where they're like, well, I don't know what to tell my friend when she tells me this. And it's like, well, sometimes you don't have to tell them anything. You can just kind of be there with them
Right.
and listen.
And hear them out. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, l- I guess one last thing, little comment or question actually is, like,
Hmm.
I don't even know how to formulate this question, but is kind of surrounds around, like, I guess I like to hear more, like, around timing and timelines, and like, um you know I may you know I may work on my resilience. How long does it take to me to become resilient? Or, you know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like, how
Yeah.
can you give us, like, could you give us,
How do you know you're there?
Yeah, yeah, or
Yeah.
yeah, or in anything else, like just um I'm having a low moment, or I'm feeling a little, I've had conversation with some, they kind of feel a little bit out of the sport, but it's, but they feel they're afraid that it's just the moment that is making them feel like they're out of the sport.
Mhm.
um would I come back to it? I don't know if that makes sense, Laura.
Yeah, so I think some of it is that self-awareness piece, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
knowing deep down that you are who you are, and it's not, whether or not you're swimming, you still are the person that you are. And I
Right.
think also like something like you're feeling low in the moment, that's
Mm-hmm.
an important distinction too. It's like the difference between I am sad and I am feeling sad. Those are sort of two different things. You aren't the emotion specifically. You are just, that's something that you're feeling, and it's temporary, hopefully. And
Mm-hmm.
how can you address that, right? And if it's something like, well, I feel like I'm not, sorry, what was the word you used? I'm not, you said, I feel like I'm not like I'm not a swimmer anymore, like because I'm not in it.
r- right. Yeah,
Sort
I'm
of
just.
that idea. Um, I think, focusing on the solution piece of that as well is like how can I get myself back into that feeling? And
Mm-hmm.
maybe it's throwing on a bathing cap and goggles while you do your your dry land. But I just love that. But there's also, maybe it's looking at old video, like you probably have race videos from either that you might have of your athletes that you use for training and watching, or maybe it's things, parents took a video of an old race, and it's kind of like just to get back into that, like feel those feelings again and put yourself in that moment, or something like
Mm-hmm.
visualizing
Mm-hmm.
those kind of moments. Those kind of things can be really powerful if you do them right.
Mm-hmm.
And again, kind of, as long as you can do that without necessarily feeling more sad, sort
Mm-hmm.
of feeling that nostalgia, like the idea of like, I do miss that, but like, hey, that was really cool, and I can't wait to do that again. As long as it's an energy gain, not an energy drain, I think it's, a good way
Mm-hmm.
to go about it.
There's a couple of questions actually rolling in now.
Yeah.
So two people ask very similar things. So it
Mhm.
revolves around motivating. Like there, I think we kind of just spoke about it, but I don't know if you want to add a little bit. But so they are saying, I don't, yeah, like, I'm not swimming, so I just I have a hard time motivating myself to do something other than swimming.
Yeah.
Um, you know, I don't know if you want to add anything to that, Laura.
Yeah. So I think, again, coming down to that why piece. So not just your why, like your overall why you do what you do, and coming back to that, and letting it guide some of your decisions and the effort that you put in, right? Remembering why you do what you do. Maybe it's because you just love the sport so much, and trying to draw those connections. And I think some of it
Mm-hmm.
comes from, partially from the coaches, and the athletes themselves could ask these kind of questions. But how does what we're doing today impact my performance? Right?
Right.
Because some of it is sort of like, okay, well, we're going to do, I'm not sure what you guys do virtually, but I imagine it's,
Mm-hmm.
dry land training. And some of it
Dryland,
is,
yeah.
yeah, some of it's like, maybe work with weights, or using body
Mm-hmm.
weight, right? Just building
Mm-hmm.
strength, maintaining strength. So those might be
Mm-hmm.
maybe obvious, like I'm doing squats to build my quads so I
Mm-hmm.
have a stronger kick, for example.
Mm-hmm.
And then some of them, the connection is even more obvious. So something like what we saw today on your social media, like the actual taking a stroke in a certain position or laying down, those are things that are connected directly, right? The why of that
Mm-hmm.
exercise, and trying to make those links as well.
I want to say I really like that slide where of I am a swimmer and everything that Laura put there. It gives you a
You can change
perspective
that
of
too.
all the things that you can. Yeah, if you go back to the
Oh yeah.
to me that was very powerful, guys. If you look at that and look at how many things you can be in that this one right here, right?
Mhm.
There is everything here can be accomplished outside of the water. Everything.
Yeah.
Um, right? Like honestly, everything you look at here, I'm sorry, I'm reading so
That's
to make
okay.
sure
Yeah, I know.
that I'm yeah, right. Like I mean, lift weights. Okay, some people don't have equipment, right? But
Yeah.
most of these
But body
things,
weight, right? Body
and
weight
yeah,
counts. Yeah.
right. And so there, it just gives you a lot to work on that you can connect to. Um, that that will give you a sense of purpose. It kind of, and then based on what you can control and what you choose to control, right, then you can generate goals, right, like just things that you can look forward to, right, based on what you are focusing on, right? So this slide
Yeah.
is really helpful for that, I think, to kind of
Yeah, I
regain
think,
some motivation. Yeah.
yeah, and write stuff like that down. Like your
Yeah.
why, when you think hard about like, what is my why? Like, why have I been doing virtual training for a year? Why are you doing that? Well,
Yeah.
you must really love your sport, or you must really, you must, maybe you love competition and you want to get back to it, or and what are ways that you can do that? Maybe you can add competition to your dry land, or
Hmm.
things like that, that you can integrate those pieces into, somehow, in spite of the lack of water, but focusing on all these other pieces that are all still things that are relevant, whether you're in the water, out of the water, whether it's whether you're a swimmer, a triathlete, a volleyball player. Like, it doesn't matter. Just a human being who wants to be really good at life. These are
Yeah,
all great things to be doing, right?
absolutely. Yeah, and we do talk a lot about that's important to us in our club, right? Is that it's not so much how high or how fast you get. I mean, obviously we're trying to get you to be as fast as you can, but
Mm-hmm.
we're also interested in producing just well-rounded individuals. So
Yeah.
this is, I love this slide. There's a question here, I think is I can probably answer. It's kids are awarded participation awards just for trying. Is competition still relevant for us? Absolutely is relevant for us. Competition is still very relevant to us. But as we've discussed a lot today, I think um, we are trying to keep people engaged as much as we can. Um, you know, I think that within workouts, I for sure encourage my swimmers to remain competitive. Just with small little exercises. I'm sure I know a lot of coaches do it too.
Yeah.
Um, we have done in the past some like more club wide competition, but to be honest, we're kind of trying, or we're working towards returning to the pool right now. So,
Mm-hmm.
um, so a major competitive component right now, we just haven't gone into yet,
Yeah.
right?
Fair,
But
fair
we're
enough.
definitely,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So,
Yeah.
but definitely, I mean, yes, we are a very competitive club, and we want
Yeah.
to do that. Yes. Sorry, I just wanted to
Yeah.
answer that question that
No,
was
that's
thrown in.
good. That's awesome.
Um, I don't have anything else. I don't see any more questions, guys. So Laura, thank you so much. That was
Yeah.
so helpful.
Oh, good.
Yeah, no, really. I think I needed that too,
Good. I'm
just
glad.
personally. So that
It's true.
so
Honestly, it's
yeah,
so hard on the coaches too. And for all you athletes that are out there listening, I hope you guys take a minute to thank Eddie and the rest of your coaches for setting these kind of talks up, because not all coaches do that. Not people aren't banging down my door asking for presentations every day. I think a lot of people think that because we're not competing and we're not training, well, why do we need to work on mental performance? But
mhm,
actually, in this time, like in the off season, even in a regular year, the off season is actually the best time to work on mental skills,
absolutely.
because there's no pressure, there's no competition. It's just, there's a learning phase, and then you can eventually take it and apply it and see
Hmm.
how it goes, and learn and apply and learn and apply, and that's kind of the best time to do it, actually. So
Yeah.
you guys give a big thank you to Eddie and your group there for setting it up.
Thanks, Laura. And I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. So this is the good time. So um thank you guys. That was it. And you know, you're welcome to give me feedback, and maybe we're gonna have Laura, but I don't know. If
Yeah, and if
if
anyone has questions, and my email's up there, and I have a website as well. If anyone's got follow up questions or concerns, just reach out anytime. I'm always happy to answer questions.
perfect. Thank you so much, Laura. That's it.
Yeah.
I'll see you guys later.
Awesome.
All right. Say hi to
Okay.
Ryan
Thank you,
for
guys.
me, Laura.
I will.
Go enjoy your little
I
kid.
will. Yeah. Have a good night.
You too. Bye.
Bye.